Whoa, Brienne. The Chosen just released 2 new scenes from season 3.
You know what that means.
Hello, everybody. My name is David.
And my name's Brienne.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest. Welcome back to talk more about The Chosen. All right, well, we got 2 new scenes from season 3, and I am going to tell you right off the bat that I cannot show these scenes. I made that mistake last time they released scenes, and I put them on there. There was a copyright issue. I had to take them down, and I had to re-record some stuff. Not doing that this time.
Yeah.
So this time, what we're going to do, this is how this is going to work. Brienne and I are going to recap what happened in the scenes, and I'm going to put some still images of our recap over the course of us recapping it. And then we'll give our thoughts about each scene. We'll take one scene at a time, recap the scene, say our thoughts, move on to the second scene, talk about our thoughts, then wrap up the video. Yeah. Short and simple. It's 10:42 p.m. right now.
It's late.
She just helped, like we just led this 3.5 hour long Bible study. I was just at school open house meeting all these teachers and stuff, and I was at school all day. I'm tired. She's tired. She needs to go back home. I need to edit this and get it uploaded. We'll try to keep this as short as possible, and this long intro isn't helping, is it? It's just not. It's not helping. I do want to apologize ahead of time if our audio is kind of messed up. We're still working through this whole 2 microphone thing, so just be patient with us. If there's a little bit of an echo, that's entirely my bad. I'm still figuring this out. I apologize. Yeah. All right, let's talk about scene number 1. Brienne, maybe you could just start us off, start recapping it a little bit, and then maybe I'll hop in and just kind of help explain stuff. Yeah.
So it's Big James and John, right? Yeah, and so they are traveling down the city road, and they're of not bickering back and forth, but they're kind of like joking.
Being brothers.
Yeah,
they're being brothers.
They're joking at each other. And then as they're coming down the road, who's it that meets them?
Okay, before that, let's go a little bit more in depth there. So what they're specifically bickering about is that John's complaining because his load is heavier than Big James's load is. And so they're like, well, let's switch, right? Because this is what brothers do, right? I am an only child, but this is what brothers do. Yeah. And so they switch their 2 loads, and then Thomas shows up. Right, and they're like, "Whoa, Thomas!" They talk about something about plans. Oh no, right before that. Sorry, we're recapping this. We just watched this. Scene. I swear, we just watched it. But they were talking about, like, in part of their bickering, Big James was talking about how he was really looking forward to getting home to eat Ema, which is just the Hebrew word for mother, getting mother's cinnamon cakes. Yes, right, and John says, John being John, and his morally superior self, he was like, what about the sermon we just heard and, like, the miracles? Which, to be fair, good question to ask. Right. And he's like, what about all this stuff? And James is like, yes, it made me very hungry. And then I believe it's right there where Thomas walks in.
I think it is. Yes. Yeah.
And so Thomas comes in, and what's going on with Thomas here?
Him and John are apparently having they've had, like, conversations behind Big James's back.
Yeah, not in like a malicious way. No, not in a malicious way.
In a funny way. They're joking about it, right? Yeah. And so they're kind of like talking about things that only them 2 know, and Big James is like, what's going on? Like, what are y'all talking about?
Yeah, there's like an inside joke going on between them, and it's obvious that John and Thomas have been forming a sort of bond, and Big James is noticeably kind of jealous of this. Right. And it basically is just letting you know there's some interpersonal dynamics between the disciples that are beginning to form, and it might cause some slight issues. Yeah. And I think that basically what was being laid in the groundwork of this particular part is that Thomas was going to be staying with them at Zebedee's house, which Zebedee is their father, right? Right, yeah. And so Big James is like, I didn't even know any of this was happening. And so they move on, and they eventually encounter Zebedee. Right. Yeah. And Zebedee shows up, and he's
like greeting them.
Yeah, 3 disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. That is a triple blessing, staying in my house, all this stuff. Yeah. And basically, it turns out that not only have John and Thomas been bonding, but apparently Thomas is also bonded with Zebedee. Yeah. And so now James is just feeling real left out, and you can see that he's hurt by this, right? And he's trying to, like, play it down, but he's hurt by it. And they have this discussion, and eventually Thomas voices that he does have a question he wants to talk to them about. And we'll talk about that in a second, like what exactly you think this question is. I think I know what it is, but maybe one of you watching this is like Big James. You're like, what is this question about? Yeah. I think I fall in the John and Zebedee category, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Brienne has a different opinion here. But apparently Thomas wants to talk to them about something, and John and Zebedee are like, we know exactly what you want to talk about. We'll talk about that. Whereas Big James is like, I have no idea what's going on. I am out of the loop. Right. I feel terrible. Like, what the heck? This is just making me so sad. And then they walk off. But before that happens, Zebedee does mention that Emma had to leave because she was all out of cinnamon. Yeah. And John gives Big James a knowing look, being like, ha ha. Take that, big brother.
Not only do you not know what we're talking about, but you also don't get your cinnamon cakes.
Yes, it's like it's just brotherly stuff,
double
right?
whammy.
And so, also I forgot to mention this. Thomas and John have this like secret handshake.
Oh yeah.
That was totally reminding me of like Peter Park and Ned, like Peter Parker and Ned from like this Marvel Spider-Man movies. That was just interesting. I was like, it felt very out of place, I will admit, in like a first century thing. Okay, I just want to admit. Okay, now we're going out of our recap and into just our thoughts because it just kind of segued into that. Yeah. So the handshake thing, I will admit. I mean, I guess that's a thing that could have happened back then. Yeah. I just never thought of it.
Yeah, me neither.
Watching it felt like a very modern thing. I was like, oh, interesting take. Like, there's like, boom, boom, boom. I was like,
fist bump.
I mean, I guess first century people could do that. Yeah, there's probably a secret handshake for the disciples.
Yeah.
What do you think about the scene?
I think The Chosen does a really good job of doing this. They kind of bring in scenes that show that the people are they're just real people. Like, showing, like, brotherly bond and, like, you know, the conversations that they would have walking down the road. Just things you necessarily wouldn't think about. I think it's cool they include that type of stuff.
Yeah. I've kind of found it interesting that they've released like 4 scenes so far, I guess, of the show, and I'm trying to remember what the first 2 scenes were. I filmed things on them. That feels like a long time. I'm really tired right now. They haven't really released anything that's inherently biblical.
Yeah,
you know, like
it's not like a crucial parts of the storyline or anything.
To be fair, a majority of this stuff in The Chosen is not biblical, but it is interesting to me that in building up anticipation for season 3, I'm surprised that they're not releasing more just tidbits. I realize that maybe a lot of biblical stuff requires more effects and stuff, and they don't want to sully that by releasing like unfinished footage. Yeah. But that is just kind of interesting to me that most of the stuff they're using to market it are more just conversations between people. Yeah. Which, to be fair, I guess that is a majority of the show. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like, just thinking from the marketing perspective, but their marketing, I trust their marketing team and everything, because I think they've got good stuff going. But I thought that was interesting. That was like a note. It's not necessarily a good or bad thing. I was just like, oh, interesting. Yeah.
It could be that, or the scenes that they've already filmed, they feel like if you were to take only a small part of it, maybe it wouldn't make sense. Or maybe it'd be like the parts that they filmed would be too much of a spoiler, like their climatic moments.
No,
that they
want
to save until the actual show, probably.
It makes a lot of sense to preserve that, because especially for the biblical stuff, it's like, you kind of want it to be a surprise. You want to be like, oh wow, that was this episode.
How are they gonna pull it off?
Putting random conversations, that's kind of fine. It's just kind of interesting when it comes to like building up anticipation. Yeah. For me, I do enjoy that, like the stuff that we're seeing in these scenes, but I really like the biblical stuff because my main thing is getting to see I'm like, wow, like that's. I'm not saying that the Bible has to be adapted in every show. I like a lot of movies and stuff. But to me, if I'm just revealing my main draw to The Chosen, it is primarily seeing the Bible adapted to screen. I know that it's not the creator's goal, like primary goal. Their main goal is to portray the lives of the disciples throughout the show. But my main thing is I really like seeing scripture adapted to screen. And so it's just something I just noted. Not a big deal at all. Probably spent way too long talking about it. What do you think that Thomas wants to talk to John and Zebedee and presumably James about?
Okay, see, I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum. I don't really know what they're talking about. And it could be because I don't even remember the last time I watched an episode of The Chosen. So trying to like,
you're a slacker.
I've watched all I've watched both seasons fully all the way through, but I haven't watched them since they came out, and it's been a really long time. While you have watched them doing like recaps and the scripture to screen and all of that. I have
watched so much of the show.
Like David can quote like he's like, oh, this is from episode such and such, to where like he knows it a lot more than I have when I've only seen all of the episodes once.
That's what happens when you have a YouTube channel that the majority of the subscribers, the majority of the subscribers of this channel are fans of The Chosen. You end up watching The Chosen a lot more.
Yeah.
So I know.
So
yeah.
I've only watched the episodes full once, and then I've watched certain scenes whenever we do ranking videos. So I don't know the full context anymore. It's just not all there. There's been a lot that I've kept in my brain since then, so I'm not quite sure what
it's kind of funny you say that because I just always forget. Like,
Yeah.
my life has been so saturated in this show just because of this YouTube channel. I forget that, like, not everybody not everybody who's even watched, like, who does these videos with me has seen the show a million times like I have.
Yeah.
That is funny. Okay. Well, I think that, and I think this is a pretty good chance is what they're wanting to talk about, just because also how Zebedee responded and John. This is exactly how guys would respond to a situation like this.
Okay.
I imagine that Thomas is wanting to talk about Rama or Rama, right? However you want to pronounce it. Different characters pronounce it different ways. So don't at me and say it's Rama, Rama. Different characters in the show pronounce it different ways. I do know that one's correct, one's not. I don't really care about pronunciation. It's not a big deal. I think he's wanting to talk about her because in season 2, episode 1, they had, that's where the father left her with Thomas and said, next time I see you, you better be marrying my daughter. And just the way the Chosen write stuff, they have, they really like bookending stuff. And there's like poetics, there's different flares. Even only in 2 seasons, you already see this cropping up. Season 2, episode 1, you've got her father saying, next time I see you, you better be marrying her.
Yeah.
Season 3, episode 1, I bet we're going to see further development of that. And so I imagine that's what he's wanting to talk to them about, being like, hey, I was thinking about asking Rama to marry me and something like that.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, like, dating was not exactly a thing back then.
Right.
And so it's probably just straight to marriage. And it's also a 7-season show, and they're not going to go the CW route and just like, oh, let's do all this drama. No, they're not going to do anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably what they're talking about. And just
it's a good idea.
The way Zebedee and John responded, that's totally how guys respond when it's like a guy wants to talk about a girl. It's like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what he's want to talk about. Yeah, I think I know what he's talking about, too. And then you got the one guy who's like,
oblivious.
I have no idea what they're wanting to talk about, but I'm sure it's probably about her.
Right. That makes sense.
Is there anything else in that scene that you think we need to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all pretty well.
Big James made me really want to try a cinnamon cake.
I know, yeah. I wonder what they are. Like, it's almost, it's, I guess, her version of, like, cinnamon rolls. Is that what it is? Because, like, cinnamon rolls, they look like little cakes.
The original
but they're not cakes,
Cinnabon.
they're more like biscuits, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like...
I do like some cinnamon, though.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know.
Good stuff. All right, scene 2. Take it away. What happens in scene 2?
So scene 2 is Simon and what's her
Eden.
name? Eden. There we go.
Yes.
I love their relationship. So that's not summarizing though. So Eden she's like kneading bread. She's in the kitchen and it's nighttime and she's kneading bread and Simon walks in and comes and stands behind her and she's like, Simon, are you gonna stand there this entire time? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna stand here the entire time.
Classic husband.
Yeah. And he's just being like super sweet. And then all of a sudden in the background, who did we say that we thought it was?
So one was Nathaniel because we heard their name.
Yes.
I'm assuming the other one's maybe Philip just because Nathaniel and Philip are pretty close friends. But the way they were acting, I can't really see Philip acting that way. So I was kind of rethinking that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be Andrew because I think that I've heard that we're going to go to Andrew's house. And so it wouldn't be him because we know that he's got a house there because he lives in that area. It's got to be people who aren't from there. So I'm thinking Nathaniel's one of them. Another one, it could be, I don't know, it wouldn't be Little James because Little James also comes from that area. It must be Philip. I don't know.
So.
I don't know. I was trying to figure that out. I don't know who the other person is.
Okay.
Oh, we could do fan speculation. Let's do theory videos. I'm kidding. Who is the other person in the room with Nathaniel fighting over the pillow? I'm kidding. But that's how fandoms usually go. Okay, sorry. Continue.
So we think that it's Nathaniel and Philip. Okay. So they're in the other room and Eden and Simon are trying to have a nice, sweet moment standing in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, you just hear them, like, in the back, like, bickering back and forth.
And they're fighting over pillows, right?
Over pillows, yeah. And so then all of a sudden, Simon's like, boys, y'all need to be quiet. And so they're like, okay, got it, we're quiet. Like, it's really funny.
In many ways, okay, so no, never mind. I'm not going to say it. Just keep summarizing the scene. I was about to start analyzing stuff. Just keep going.
So they told him to be quiet, and then they made some reference talking about.
They started talking about the sermon and stuff.
Yeah.
We probably should have just like had this playing and just like I don't know. There's probably a better way to do this. It's fine. It's late. I was just like, hey, this is easier to edit. Let's just recap it. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're talking, and eventually the conversation turns to the sermon and stuff like that. And I think
they
said,
it's because, do you have to like go and study? Do you have to go and read? And they're like, oh, like they have to study. And he's like, don't you need to study too?
Yeah. That's so Eden turns to Simon and says, don't you need to go and study too? And he says, yeah, I need to study. And he like gives her those eyes, and you're like, oh, he's not talking about the sermon.
Yeah.
And so then they just like kind of walk off, and you're like, okay, so that's a little romantic endeavor for them. Okay, so that scene was a lot shorter, and sometimes it was a little bit harder to tell what was going on just because it was a little bit less like it was a little bit more raw.
Yeah, and he even said that like the audio was weird and all that type of stuff. So
yeah, and that's why we're not allowed to post the actual scene here, because they said they don't want that getting out. And so I put still images. There you go. What did you think about this scene?
So, like I was saying before, I love Eden and Simon's relationship. There's other scenes, like especially I think it's whenever like he went fishing on the Sabbath or something like that, and she was like getting on to him. There was that one, and then is that the same time she might have been whenever she was like pressing the grapes or whatever in the house? Time. Okay, that was a different time. I love all of their encounters. They have a very sweet relationship, and they balance each other out really well. So I like seeing more scenes of them two together.
Yeah. I also really like their scenes together. I know that there's going to be some conflict in this season again with them, because there's one scene it cracks me up. They've posted it on their story, I believe, on social media. I don't keep up with a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. Like some of my fellow YouTubers, they are on top of it, and they are just like everything The Chosen, and they're just, I got too much stuff to do. I do not have time to track every single behind the scenes thing that's going on with The Chosen. I that's not my focus. And so if they release a scene, I'll analyze the scene. But there was one scene that they had posted, and Eden is going on this long rant at Simon. I think I might have showed it to you.
I saw it.
And she is yelling at him, and she's like, "You did this, and like, and then all you did is you came home and took a nap." And then there's this long pause. Yeah. And it just pans to Simon, and then he looks at her and says, "You told me to take a nap." And it's like, you're just like, wrong thing to say.
Wrong words.
One thing I will say that I hope over the course of the show, I mean, this sounds kind of bad, but if they continue having conflict between them, I hope there's at least one moment where she's in the wrong, if that makes sense.
Right, because it's always Simon.
Just because so far it has consistently been Simon, at least there's really only been two major conflicts between them, because she wasn't really in season 2. She was in season 1, and there was that huge conflict, but that stretched most of the first season. Well, at least the first half of the season. It was episodes 1 through 4. And then we know that there's going to be some more conflict in season 3. I'm assuming it's going to be very brief, but if they're going to keep putting conflict in there, I do think that it's better if it's both ways, just so that it doesn't keep making Simon look like, I mean, you do want to point out the flaws in the disciples, but you don't want to do that to the point where Eden is looking like this perfect individual, if that makes sense. Because, I mean, Eden is amazing. I think she's fantastic. Like, the way she's portrayed their marriage is fantastic. But that's just more from a creative perspective. I'm just kind of hoping that they do that. Just because I think it'd be really good to see a healthy Christian relationship like that depicted, where both more have realistic. To admit their faults, rather than there just being one person who's faultless and one person who's not. I think it'd be good to see both. And I'm sure that we will see that. I'm not saying that The Chosen's not doing that. I think that that's probably very realistic. I'm just kind of speculating there. Yeah. One thing I will say, and once again, this is not negative. This is just, I have to clarify that, because one thing I will say about The Chosen fandom is, like, if you say anything critical about The Chosen, they will come for your neck. Yeah. And I think that is not good. I think that we should be better there. It's a TV show. But I'm not trying to be critical here. It's okay. I will say, like, the little interaction between Nathaniel and them, I'm sure that once they finally edit it, it'll sound a little bit more natural. But the way it came across in, like, the kind of raw edited version is that they didn't really sound like adults. They sounded more like how
they were their kids.
Well, yeah, like I'm not saying adults are beyond fighting over a pillow, but the dialogue or something the way it was delivered, it sounded more like adults acting like children, if that makes sense, which I think that might have been the joke.
I think.
And so I think once you get to the final edit, like TV shows, everything, it's all made in the editing. If you don't believe me, go look at my one video. It's the most popular video on my channel. It's like if The Chosen was a horror movie. Things are made in the editing room. right? And so I think that it'll come across a little bit more fluid in the final cut to where it'll be like, oh yeah, because the joke I think is that they are disciples acting like children.
Yeah.
But in like the rough cut, it almost sounded cartoonish. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I was about to say that.
Yeah, I think that was where I was like, oh, like it just felt kind of out of place because most of the show has seemed a little bit more like there's jokes in it, but it still felt more grounded in reality, if that makes sense. And I really think that it was kind of the same thing with the handshake thing to me, to where that almost like took me out. It was like, it almost felt just like out of place in the show, because I do really like how the show has done a good job of like taking the first century and incorporating enough 21st century culture to make it relatable. But there's certain places where I'm like, okay, you're making it so relatable that it feels out of place in that culture.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that once everything's edited, it'll look a lot smoother and sound a lot smoother. That was just something like watching the rough cuts. I was like, that was an interesting choice. Like, I'll be interested to see what the final cut looks like, because I do trust the creators, like, to do this. Like, I haven't seen the rough cuts of the episodes in seasons 1 and 2.
Right.
And I imagine it's probably the same way whenever they make certain jokes. Like, whenever they're like, oh, this house is haunted, or this one room's haunted, and Jesus is like, oh, I'll take that room. I mean, that was a joke he made in season 2, and it's kind of a corny joke, but it works in the show because of how everything's edited.
Right. Yeah,
I imagine the rough cut of that did not sound nearly as fitting.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what's going to happen there. This is just our thoughts to just share so that we can get conversation going.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I wish I knew who the other person was. I'm sure if I had been watching behind the scenes stuff, I would know who was partnered with who and stuff. But I don't have time for it.
It'll clarify it in the show when it comes out.
Yes, it will clarify it in the show when it comes out.
And all answers will be
but
available.
Look, we got one scene from season 3, episode 1, one scene from season 3, episode 2.
There we go.
So that's kind of cool.
That is pretty cool.
Anything else we need to mention before we wrap this up?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't really, there's not really a lot to analyze here, and so really it was just kind of us just talking, sharing our thoughts. Please do not throw stones at us if you
can let
disagree.
us know your thoughts kindly.
No, please do that. I really want to hear your thoughts, and guess what? I won't throw stones at you if our thoughts are different.
We can conversate.
Yes, conversation is great. I think that Christians should have conversation. Are you excited for The Chosen Season 3? I imagine if you're watching this video, you probably are, because this has already been a 20-minute long video. And
if you've made it this far.
Yeah, if you've watched a 20-minute video of people talking about scenes from The Chosen, you're probably excited. So let us know what you're most excited about, what you're looking forward to in Season 3. Which of these 2 scenes was your favorite one?
Yeah.
And what do you agree with about what we said? What do you disagree with about what we said? What are other things that you noticed about the scenes that we probably didn't mention? Because I know that people are going to be watching this and say, hey, you didn't mention that one thing about that scene.
Yeah.
Yes, I do not have an eidetic memory or whatever the word is for perfect memory. I don't got it. I wish I did. But we watched it one time and recapped it. There you go.
And let us know who you think is in the room with Nathaniel.
Yes. What is your fan theory? And I want you to justify it and like defend it with 5 points. Full sentences, please.
There you go.
I'll give you a grade once you do that. My teacher's
coming
out. All right. Thank you for watching this video. My name is David.
And my name's Brian.
And this has been Now Let's Be Honest. Be sure to keep a smile on your face and don't let anybody steal your joy. We will see you down in the comments to talk more about this fantastic show. God bless.
You read a verse, you sing a hymn, the money's in the plate. Sundays you mark out for him, but even then you show up late. You bought the shirt, you wear the cross, but sin throughout the week. For 30 shekels and a noose, you kiss him on the cheek.